Let's finish up by talking about working with files and go over some of the different file types common to Modo and Cinema 4D. So let's go to File, and let's start with Open, and just take a look at some of the file types that we can use in Modo. So if we come in here, we can see some of the file types here. .lxo is going to be the basic file type that we can use in Modo, but there's lots of different files that we can use to move back and forth, not only between Modo and Cinema 4D, but with other applications as well. So we've got Lightwave objects, we've got Alembic caches that are common to Cinema 4D as well, Collada, DXF, actually Adobe Illustrator, where you can move curves back and forth, and we'll actually take a look at that in a second. We've also got Fbx, which is a fairly universal file type that you can use to go back and forth, also STL and OBJ files. So lots of different options for moving back and forth between Modo and Cinema 4D. Let's take a look at some of the ways that we can work with files here. So right now we're opening a scene. So let's go in and we can open a basic scene file, but we can also open an FBX. So let's say this biker export in our project files is something we want to open. So we'll go ahead and open that up. We get the Fbx Load option, so we can choose what parts of the Fbx we actually want to load in at this time. So we'll just say OK to that. This is OK. There's 2 warnings, but no errors reported. That's fine. So we'll go ahead and bring this in. So you can see we have a character model, some geometry came in along with a material group, material, and some textures. So you can see there's a little bit of sharpness on that edge. I can just go into this material, go down to the smoothing angle, and let's just change this to like 60 degrees to kind of smooth that out. But you can see lots of stuff came in with that FBX. Okay, so one thing to keep in mind is that we actually have this FBX open as a scene file. So if you look in our item list, you can see that biker_export.fbx listed here, that we actually have this open. It hasn't been imported into a new scene. So if we were to modify this and save it, we'd actually be saving that FBX file. We can also import geometry into our scene. So we'll go to File, Import, and here we can choose another file. So let's just choose this car export, and this is an OBJ file, completely different format. So we'll go ahead and import this in. I'm just going to leave all these as is. We'll talk about these a little bit more in a second. But let's just bring this into our scene. So we've got the player geometry in here, and then we have a car now in here as well. But you can see we're still working in this biker export.fbx. So we've just imported this geometry into this scene. Now, there's a couple of ways we can save these out. So if we go to Save As, we would actually be changing the name of the scene file that we're working in. So Save As, whatever we want to save it as, then we would be working in that file. But if we just want to save a copy out somewhere and continue working on our original file, instead of using Save As, we would go to Export As, and that would accomplish that same thing. Let's now take a look at some of the options that we saw there for that OBJ and some of the things to think about. So I'm just going to go to File, and let's go to Open to open a new scene, and I'm just going to open that car again right here. So we'll just say Open. It's going to bring up these options. Now with Cinema 4D, it's really nice because Cinema 4D uses meters as well as Modo, and so we don't have to change our file units. You can see the car here came in the correct size, so we don't have to modify these units. Let's go ahead and open this without checking anything and then look at something specific here. So we're going to go ahead and open this up, and you can see since we opened it, it's going to actually create this as a new scene file. But again, just like Cinema 4D, we can have multiple files open at once. So if you want to close this out, you need to right click on this, and say Close Scene, and then we're left with our single scene unless you want to have a bunch of them open. Now one thing that you notice here is that this car, which is made up of a bunch of different pieces, is actually one mesh. So we can access all the pieces by accessing them via component mode, and we could go in and copy and paste these into their own mesh items. But in a lot of cases, especially in something like this, you'd probably want your geometry to come in multiple pieces. So in that case, when you open up your OBJ, and this is exported from Cinema 4D, so let's say yes. Okay, so it's going to bring up these options. We want to import groups as separate meshes. So that will allow us to bring in all of our geometry, and it'll know that we want different mesh items for each of those pieces. Now it's going to create lots and lots of mesh items for us to deal with, but at least they're all separate, and we can go in and combine the ones that we want to, or you can bring in things separately as separate OBJs as well. You can do that. Okay, so just be aware of that option when you're opening up OBJs. You do have the option to bring those in as separate maps. Okay. Now, one other thing that I wanted to show you that's actually pretty cool is that we can bring in curves. So one of the things that Cinema 4D is really, really good at is working with splines. And you can create lots of different shapes, and the things that you can do with those with MoGraph and with the generators and things are really, really cool. So if you want to bring in a curve or spline to Modo, you can do that. You just need to assign a sketch and tune to it and then export it from Cinema 4D as an AI file. And then we can come in here and we can open this up. And so let's come down and grab this flower export and just open this up. And you can see a familiar spline from Cinema 4D we've opened up now inside of Modo, and we can go from here and begin modeling on it there. Also, one thing that I wanted to mention before we go is that if you bring in models and they start to get some shading errors, you can check the materials like we did with the character that came in. Another thing to check is just to go into the lists under some of these some of these vertex maps, and there may be a normals map in there, that normal vertex map that you need to change or get rid of, depending on how the surface looks when you start to modify it or model on it. So just keep that in mind. All right, so that's a look at how we can integrate Modo into our Cinema 4D workflow. So it's up to you how you want to take advantage of that, whether you want to transition to Modo for some things like polymodeling, or maybe you want to still use Cinema 4D for the really cool MoGraph tools that you have, and then maybe integrate some of the features in Modo into your workflow. It doesn't have to be all or nothing. They can definitely work together. You just have to be aware of some of the quirks and differences in the way the hotkeys work, and some of the workflows are going to be a little bit different as well between those applications. But again, it's up to you how you want to start to integrate those into your workflow. It might take a little bit of time to get used to, kind of where to move your fingers, but Modo makes it really, really easy to transition. So I want to thank you so much for spending some time learning about Modo. Have fun integrating it into your own workflow.